For the record, John Willis is not sitting on my lap. Jeff Williams just so happens to be like 7 foot tall, right? And I have like four different conference talks this week, and my theme is I'm cooler than Jason Chan. So, okay. That's my Twitter info too as well. I'm on Twitter all the time, so I post a lot of my whole sort of shtick is the application of chaos engineering to security. I do a lot of speaking on that. If you're interested in hearing more about that, I'll be around afterwards as well. So UnitedHealth Group. So a lot of people think UnitedHealth Group, they think UnitedHealth Care. We haven't been that company since like the 1970s. We're a Fortune 5 company. We are the largest private healthcare company in the world. We're not one company, we're closer to 400. It's really more like 32,000 software engineers. We have a lot of applications. When I say diverse technology portfolio, what that means is I like to call it the United Nations of technology. Every technology is equally represented. We have everything from mainframe to microservices to machine learning. So that brings what this slide is really meant to convey. One, for folks to know a little bit more about the company, but also give you the complexity and scale and how highly regulated we are. Transformation is hard, but I'm going to share my stories on how I successfully made 3 digital transformations succeed. Oh, what is my role? Yeah, I'm the chief security architect for UnitedHealth Group. My job is mostly strategy and whatnot. They tried to call me evangelist, but I won't let them. So I'm going to talk a bit about. This whole idea from the talk came from a sort of an offsite event at RSA. If you're not familiar with RSA is a sort of marquee security conference for the enterprise. We were there with a lot of the big Valley engineering sort of leaders, and we're talking about so what are some problems left in DevOps unsolved, and what are the next set of problems. And I can't remember how we ended up getting to talk about it, but I started talking about how empathy is a two-way road, right? Meaning I always hear security people talking about how developers need to learn security. Well, you know what? How about we teach software engineering to security? And I'll tell you what, it was a great experiment. We got some great rewards. But people kept asking me so many questions. And so Gene came up to me and said, hey, Aaron, we can talk about that. I'd like to explore more into that. So that's why I'm going to talk on this. When I began sort of the transformational journey at UnitedHealth Group, it was like 4.5 years ago. We're so large, I knew I couldn't change everything. But what I wanted to do was show people what was possible and make bold moves. So part of what we did was I ran across this tool called Gauntlet. Anybody here ever heard of Gauntlet? Okay. Actually, James Wickett, the creator, both him and Karthik are speaking at the conference. Gauntlet actually, so we ended up creating, actually, here's my slides. So the need for bold moves. Yeah, and to demonstrate the part of what we were, what I was seeking to do was show people what is possible, right? And one of the ways I did that, I was given a panel yesterday, and somebody asked me about culture and define culture at the company. I actually used the company's culture, our core values, as leverage for why DevOps was important, right? And it was a really great, successful moment. I was able to show how some of the practices were worth investing in and how they reinforced our culture, the company. So security can drive transformation, especially at companies like UnitedHealth Group, where we're highly regulated. And security, we have a lot of security requirements. So that's really what Gauntlet did was, so I couldn't change our existing tool sets, the monolithic tool sets and processes. What I could do is fix the the scan, fix, repeat cycle at the end of every build with tools by driving the feedback loop left. What Gauntlet allowed us to do was to actually put the scans into Jenkins and run them earlier and provide the feedback quicker. Actually, at our scale, Gauntlet was saving millions of dollars at the company. So Gauntlet, yeah, there we go. Another key part of that original transformation is this is like, actually, now that I look at it, it's kind of like the theme here is I'm slowly chipping away at security at the company, changing the mindset by demonstrating what our core constituents, the pain and how we could actually drive value by thinking a little differently. So InSpec, is anybody here familiar with that? Configuration validation tool, essentially. We're able to drive sort of our security baselines and whatnot, as well as validate certain configurations where this really helped drive the audit process. We're audited by everybody. Like, you're probably auditing us. So somebody out there in the audience is probably auditing us. So having good audit records it was really important for the company. So InSpec was really key there. It brought that auditor community to the DevOps movement and to see the value. So 2.5 years later, I started thinking we need more bold moves, right? So how do we keep changing the direction of the Titanic? I mean, the Titanic moves in inches, right? So we need to keep moving it. So my thinking was we need more bold moves. The case for open source. So this is an interesting story, actually. So we hired our first SRE at UnitedHealth Group. Well, shoot, it's almost 2 years ago now. But his name's Patrick Bergstrom. And he was at BestBuy.com. So since I led sort of the DevOps sort of transformation, I kicked it off. When they hired this guy, at the time I didn't even know what an SRE was. So, and they hooked us up and said, hey, you got to meet this guy, Aaron. Hey, you got to meet this guy, Patrick. So we got together. Patrick started telling me about, what an SRE does, and started explaining to me this thing called chaos engineering, right? They would intentionally break parts of BestBuy.com to improve it, to drive further resilience. And I was like, whoa, you do what, right? And it really started triggering in my head. Later that evening, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was like, I started thinking about how we design security. And I started thinking about, well, security needs to be resilient too, So why not try it, right? So I put together a team of just folks, almost all three transformational efforts that I've been involved in required no funding. Just people want to do great things. People crave meaningful work. And we were able to, I put a team together, and we started experimenting. But, actually we went from idea to deliver open source, the first open source project for the company, in 7 weeks. It's never been done at UnitedHealth Group before, ever. We've never done anything like that. It was just an awesome effort. Actually, partly what made it fun was the project name. Having cool code names is kind of fun. Because there's Chaos Monkey. How many people heard of Chaos Monkey? Oh wow. Okay. Wow. All right. How many people heard of Chaos Engineering? Oh, same. Okay. So I was thinking, like, there's this Simian Army thing, a bunch of monkeys, right? Well, if I'm going to create a security tool, right, that breaks security, what do monkeys throw, right? So we called it Boostlayer. It was originally called Boostlayer. And I remember the first time I told John Willis about that, he's like, no, Aaron, no. So you'll see it's called Chaos Slinger in a minute. But so we'll talk about bold moves, right? What better for a very risk-averse, right, highly regulated, very important infrastructure component for the United States. Like you have to imagine, open source was not even a thought, right? So luckily, I had a partner in the open source office, an open source attorney, that we partnered and said, we're going to do this, right? We went through all the requirements that we needed to do to open source it, and we just did it, right? We followed all the legal requirements, made sure, you want to make sure you do that if you do this. We kind of figured out the way to get it out there. And I will tell you, when we released Chaos Slinger, Chaos Slinger. We released Chaos Slinger. It was very much in sort of a homegrown fashion, where it was a Friday night, we're all in our jammies on WebEx, cracking beers, right? And we released it, and so we got on Twitter, and we did a post on Twitter and one on LinkedIn, and then it got such feedback. It's got such a strong social media response that on Monday morning, I got a phone call from our brand office. Our brand office said, "Hey, Aaron, what's this GitHub-y thing?" Because I was trending number 2 for the entire company. So what I want to say with that is that's the power behind this stuff, right? So this was the first. I think now we have 14 different open source. It drove a transformation. And what better tool than a tool that breaks security on purpose, right? So that's what Chaos Slinger does. So Chaos Slinger is I have a lot of stuff. If you go to my Twitter, I have a lot of postings and slides and talks about how to do all this stuff and how to get started with it. But Chaos Slinger is what's funny is we originally started writing it in Go until about 3 days in, we realized nobody knew Go. So everybody knew Python, so we wrote it in Python. So it's a serverless app in AWS, where it's a Lambda. There is a requires 4 functions to execute the experiment. But there's a chat ops integration. There's a lot of cool little tchotchkes about it. But really cool tool. If you want more information on chaos engineering, you go to principlesofchaos.org. Or there's a GitHub repo out there called Awesome Chaos Engineering. I don't know if you've ever seen the Awesome repos. There's one for chaos engineering. So getting back to it. So pulling the Titanic forward. Okay. So what Chaos Slinger, chaos engineering, really did for UnitedHealth Group, well, especially the security pieces, was for us to think differently about how our systems really work. So there's a difference between the mental model about how people believe their systems work versus how they actually do. I mean, John Allspaw always talks about when was the last time you ever saw a line of code actually execute, right? You've never actually seen it execute. You've always seen footsteps in the sand, stack traces or log events. But that's not supposed to be a challenge. That's supposed to raise a point, right? Is that how well do we understand how our systems work? Especially in the world of companies that are achieving a true microservice architecture, mature cloud computing, and mature continuous delivery. When you get those 3 things, think about the velocity and scale of which our systems are working now, and the distributed nature of how they operate. We've got to the point where we're developing complex adaptive systems. If you're not familiar with that sort of realm, Dr. Richard Cook gave a really great talk at DUS London. That is really awesome. It's called Working at the Center of the Cyclone. But chaos engineering is one way you can battle, sort of building that understanding of the unknown. The events, the log events you didn't know about, right? Or the behaviors of the system that weren't apparent. So what was next after chaos engineering, open source, sort of a DevOps and security transformation? One of the things I noticed, other than just being annoyed at the fact that everybody wants to teach developers security, they tried to get me to write the developer security training. I just refused. I couldn't do it. Right? I just flat out, I was like, let's just give one slide and say, it'd be done. So there's a skills shortage at UnitedHealth Group when it comes to software security, and that was also, I felt, what was challenging. A lot of what was happening is that on the security side, if it was DevOps related, if it was continuous delivery related, are software related. Oh, let Aaron solve it, right? Or go to, what I realized is that there's kind of an underlying fear. There are a lot of people that fear to code. They fear the process. It looks like, garbage on a page, right? But it's a skill that's easily learned. I mean, Python was originally written for children, right? So what I decided in December, I guess December of last year, I went to my boss, Robert Booker, and I said, hey, I want to add a development goal to all security people at UnitedHealth Group. There's no reason. We're not trying to create coders. What we're trying to do teach software engineer security, nah. Right. What we're trying to do is sort of build a common understanding, common problem, common enemy. And just the feedback of people trying to download Python from our internal app store, they started seeing, oh wow, there's a lot of red tape here and hurdles, and it's building common empathy, common understanding of problem. And then also the coding, something else happened that I didn't expect. We had 20% of the people that took it were already coders. They were doing project management and other functions that had nothing to do with coding, but it was a major revelation. There was one person in the organization that was one of the original developers for NASDAQ, the NASDAQ trading platform, right? And just blew my mind. But what started happening is that so empathy is two-way street. So I'll get to that in a minute. So basically what I did was I built this simple and free Python course, right? That way I didn't need approval for funding, because I didn't want to go through that jazz, especially when I'm 100% self-taught in all of it. So I see no reason why there's not resources on the internet. So the course was, as it stands, and I can put a gist on GitHub if it's better later for people to see. But the course was, if you've never written a line of code in your entire life, you have no idea what syntax is, go to the Code Academy, free course, not the paid one, just the free one, just get an idea of what syntax is, right? But if you had written some kind of code before you knew what you were doing, maybe you're a database programmer or something, was that you go to the AutomateTheBoringStuff.com. Anybody heard of that before? Automate the Boring Stuff? It's one of the seminal books in learning to code on your own. The full book is on AutomateTheBoringStuff.com. It's for Python. But what it is the Python course itself actually, Python is a Swiss Army knife. I mean, you can do everything from make a cheese sandwich to do machine learning, right? That's partially what makes me even more lazy, is that I haven't had to learn another language yet, because Python kind of does everything. I mean, Go is probably a better equivalent, but on AutomateTheBoringStuff.com, there's all these use cases like how to automate moving files from file shares, how to automate sending emails and things, just stuff like that everyday people could use. And so let's get here. Why not? Awesome returns. So what ended up happening is that teams, so the requirement was that people had to complete the course, steps 1, 2, 3, and complete the AutomateTheBoringStuff.com and complete the Code Academy. But what had happened is that people ended up creating coding challenges, and we ended up having we had one. Let's see, so many former programmers. We had one actually CCIE write a firewall automation API. Wow, right? That's awesome. I mean, one of the key things that was a huge issue for us at United was the firewall outages due to firewalls, right? Whether somebody didn't understand the flow, they filled the form out wrong, all kinds of stuff. Somebody typed the port in wrong. The API, so we already had standards and rule sets, and he just took that standardization of those rule sets and being a CCIE obviously had the depth and context of what to write. But I just thought that was amazing, right? This thing that took me a couple hours and is really my own ego, that sort of put this sort of requirement out there for developers, for security people to learn to code, but it ended up driving all this change. We had our security incident response team started building their own apps, started taking on. They were the first team to start taking on sort of DevOps practices. They made this mandate that they were not going to use anything that a developer at UnitedHealth group could not use, right? They were going to, because sometimes security, they could, sometimes people in security think they're above the law, right? But they're not. That was awesome. And now it's really a purposeful built tool around how we deal with its response, and it's really driving a lot of value there. And this whole new sense of empathy, just hearing, so the concept of DevOps and Sec DevOps and all that other stuff, right? It went from being a fad and something cool that Aaron was doing with the software engineering teams to this is here to stay. This is a better way of doing things, and we can write code too. So there are projects now where we're taking our policies and standards, the regulatory requirements that we translate into requirements internally in the company to satisfy those requirements. We're actually creating code that reflects those pieces instead of having people try to translate words on paper, right? I don't know how to build that from this thing. Well, we're contributing tangible pieces back into product now versus trying to explain often a policy or standard that we don't even understand to somebody who has to do something with it. So it's really driving just this change of thinking and sort of empathy. I always like to say empathy is a two-way street, and it's been pretty cool. I'd say one of the biggest obstacles for me in the early days of the DevOps transformation 4.5 years ago was our scanning teams, our what we call our attack surface management, they do our web inspects and the fortifies and all that stuff. They saw me as changing their job, right? Is that causing havoc, that team fundamentally flipped, and it was kind of rewarding for me inside. I mean, to see them totally go. Because when I originally went to that team, and I asked the person who runs the scanning for Web Inspect, I said, hey, can we automate this with Jenkins? And he said, you can't automate Web Inspect. And I just kind of blew my mind. I was like, okay, you realize Web Inspect is software, right? Somebody automated something for that to even exist, right? But like that whole mindset changed. That team is now they're driving their own vision. They're writing their own code. We were doing any of this stuff a year and a half ago. I never thought that just this one little thing would drive so much change. I mean, I would say at the end, we didn't get a whole bunch of new coders. But what we did was, I think we changed people's thinking. And there are people now that understand programming. They may never write another line of code again. But they went through it. They understand what it is. They understand it's not that hard. Because writing code, it's quality of thought more than it is, the actual code itself. So another key sort of return was because of this change in thought and people understanding, people started understanding more about. So we used to have this a patch management policy that include infrastructure assets as well as software, and people didn't understand that software is really not patches like Patch Tuesday with Microsoft. It's different. Like you have to write it, right? You have to test it, right? And all the software is fixed differently. And that team went forth and wrote their own software security policy that was really in tune, and it really helped change the mindset. And so the development community at UnitedHealth Group really has seen this, and we've driven the model more flat and more transparent. But a really cool part about when you give somebody the ability to write code, and you collapse the model from now you have people that can go from idea to a product on their own, right? You have this new sort of innovation engine. It's not possible now. Not every person is going to do that, right? But you've created the ability. So remember, be bold, and do what feels right. So those are my key takeaways. I'm going to open it up for some questions. Do I have time for questions? Yeah. Any questions? Go for it. Oh, in the front.
What do you use managing for database release automation? Specifically, do you automate EDL changes through your pipeline? You have pipelines for application changes?
Oh yeah, so I mean, from a pipeline perspective and automation, I mean, we use the standard stuff, Jenkins. We actually have our Jenkins pipelines as code. We also have Jenkins service, but we a lot of standard stuff it's in there. I mean, what the tools are that we use.
Specifically, do you have anything or do you use anything for database changes?
We're working on that. So the data side, that would be another challenge for us is more sort of the DevOps and release changing when it comes to database changes. That's just it's not a space where we've had a lot of success yet. So yeah, that's a good question. You had a question, sir?
I just have another question. So Gauntlet uses Gherkin as a language to drive the test, which is really cool.
And Cucumber, yeah.
Yeah, for the less technical.
Yep.
What do you use for your tool?
Oh, Chaos Linear?
Yeah.
So it's Python. It's Python and Lambdas. So we originally started writing it in Go because Chaos Monkey's written in Go. We went through the logic. And if you look at Chaos Monkey's code, almost like 90% of that you don't need anymore. You don't need Spinnaker. Do you really need Spinnaker? Most of the stuff that was in the tool is all now cloud native, right? So why not just do API calls and Lambdas, make it cheaper for people to run, and the code's lighter and tighter, right? So you can write more of it. It's easier, more transparent for people to understand what it does when there's not hundreds of lines of code. But anybody wants to follow up on chaos engineering, we can talk more about that outside or some other time. My contact information is on there. It's kind of my shtick, so it's today's talk wasn't about that, but I'm more than happy to. Go ahead.
So are you going to take this program any further with more developer or more security continuing education on that development track?
Oh yeah. I think we're gonna. So there's a lot of feedback from my fellow leaders. Actually, there was a lot of feedback early on. The director of regulatory compliance came to me and said, "Aaron, are we all going to become software programmers?" I'm like, "Nobody wants your code, man." And once I started explaining what we were trying to do, I think one of the things that came up was the automation challenges as part of our. We're building a advocate program, our security satellite, security champion, Maven, if you guys are familiar with that concept, building sort of coding challenges as a part of that program. I think we're going to continue to make it a base requirement and see where it goes. Go ahead.
For your security team, in the sense of working in more of a DevOps way, when you get a security incident, are they coming with what are you doing to trap those incidents? Are they coming into ServiceNow or something, and then you're using the DevOps process to address them? Or can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that with respect to making that shift more automation?
Yeah. So that's a dang good question. So we have a lot of things we've been changing there. We had this massive security big data lake that we wrote. We ended up shifting away from it, we wrote this. I don't know. Application security logging is still hard in 2018. I don't know why. I don't know why we haven't solved that one yet. I've never run into anyone who's really solved that. So driving the incident data, we do use ServiceNow and drive it through that. But we really Osiris is what the tool was called that they built. It was, Optum. So UnitedHealth Group breaks down two major brands: UnitedHealth Care and Optum. And so it's called the Optum Security Incident Response Information System, Osiris. Yeah. It really brings in sort of the paging and the alerting of the responders, the information to ServiceNow, war rooming, firing up war rooms, tracking it, auditing it. So it was really kind of a cool, they had a lot of pain points in a lot of the COTS tools that they were trying to use because, I mean, we're behemoths. And I'm like, we acquire 30 to 40 companies a year and just junk comes in that way. I mean, and you know, it's just sort of the complexity in how we operate, like Conway's Law, if you will. Organizations are destined to design systems that reflect their communication patterns. Well, you know, that's where a lot of our complexity comes in. So, yeah, good question. Other questions? Let's see. Okay, all right, great. Thank you very much.